Hey guys, it's been a while. Cam, Surprise Studios, that Hookscrap game, remember? Spaceshooter, Harpooner? You get the point. This video is made to be a finalizing devlog for Hookscrap, and to explain what we learned as a small indie team. To give you a brief summary, it's nothing that you expect it to be. But without further ado, let's chat about what we learned from releasing an indie game. And oh yeah, we said release, because Hookscrap is coming to Steam. Make sure to wishlist on Steam, shout it from the rooftops that Hookscrap is Game of the Year 2023. Let's dive in. It can be so exciting to start a project when you're filled with passion and excited to dive straight in, which should be nurtured, but carefully. There's a popular saying that goes along the lines of, every 10 minutes of planning saves you an hour in execution. This is definitely a sentiment that we should have held on to, and I have already executed in my projects that I'm a part of now. I'll give you an example, the component system. It's a system of items that drastically alter the gameplay of Hookscrap. You can have a thruster that deals burn damage, you can have a triple harpoon shooter, you don't even have to have a harpoon. They're all super cool, but they can be very time consuming to produce, and they come with a plethora of balancing issues and of course, plenty of new bugs. I think you can get the picture. This is what can be deemed as a high-risk feature, where the length of completion was unknown. That can be attributed to many of the different issues that arise when making a system that has so many unique parts. A low-risk feature is one that can be easily created due to it having a simplistic implementation, a developer already knowing how to make said feature, or it just takes a small amount of resources to get a completed version of that feature. An example of a low-risk feature could be a gun system in a first-person shooter. You can create a base gun and make a ton of different variations by just changing variables. So let's say you have a base assault rifle with assault rifle stats. You want an SMG, make the fire rate faster, damage lower. You want to have a sniper rifle, make the shot speed between rounds slower and crank up the damage. Easier said than done, but you get the point. This makes it easy to have a huge facet of the game completed with very low risk. On the other hand, in Hookscrap, you have many different components that are difficult to build off of each other. For example, you can't really turn the auto repair drones, which give health back on each scrap ship, into the maw, which removes the harpoon, and you destroy ships based on collision damage. There really isn't any overlap between the two. With enclosing deadlines and scope at its all-time high, we needed to cut back. We cut half the original components from the game because although they were cool, they were monstrous in scope, and it would have not been realistic to complete within our time frame. Hindsight is definitely 2020, and it has 100% made us reevaluate our thought process before going head deep into creating a mechanic or feature. I would totally recommend, regardless of if you're working solo or with a team, to write out or discuss a few different points about each feature before implementing them. And some of these points can just be, is it risky? Do we know how to do this? Do we have the time, resources, etc.? Do we know how long it's going to take to develop? That being, how long to iterate it, because the first time's never going to work out, and how long will it take to balance afterwards? And then after that, how will we integrate it with the other mechanics and systems, which will definitely be the biggest head scratcher, and will definitely just depend on the skill of programmers or the knowledge they have with just integrating this with the different systems in your game. This is definitely not a definitive list of questions you need to be asking, but just some ideas to get the gears churning. You need to be thinking about how a feature will be implemented before you jump in guns blazing, as it'll definitely save you time and the headache.
So over the development of Hookscrap, I'd have to say that I learned the most about properly scoping a project beforehand and about prototyping. When it comes to scope, we definitely made some big mistakes. We started the project in April with the plan to finish it in June at first, and it's now January of the next year. So if that tells you anything about us over scoping for what we intended to for our intended development time. I think the mistake that we actually, it's not that we were obviously let's just make as big of a game as we can. The real problem was that we didn't spend enough time estimating how much time every piece of the game would take. We didn't look at, okay, we have this many assets, each of them will take this amount of time, or we have this many systems, how long will it take to program? And because of that, we were just let's just run at it, we can do it. But that ended up pushing the project way beyond what we intended. When it comes to prototyping, we did some prototyping, but we put more time into some larger systems, and that gave us a primary gameplay that wasn't very fun, and so we ended up having to prototype a bit mid development to make some major changes. And that was probably when I realized just how off our process was. Recently, I've been looking into Devops a lot more. Devops is this concept of, while you're making software, you also want to be working towards operations, which is like working towards deployment. And in this case with games, it's we needed to have DevOps in the fact that we needed to be developing to make something we can test. We did not do that in the slightest. It took a very long time for us to have a game to play, and that was a problem. I'm glad we still kept going despite the mistakes along the way. And HOOKSCRAP has been an incredibly fun experience, and I'm excited to work on the next project.
For one, I learned that I'm really a team player at heart. Before we formed Surprise Studios, before we began work on HOOKSCRAP, I was pretty much just working on game projects solo with hardly any outside perspective. What I realized though is that you can accomplish way more in a team setting, and I think this project has been a solid example of that. Everyone on this team played to each other's strengths and weaknesses, and when you have a team dynamic like ours, your effectiveness as a solo developer is multiplied by 100. Really, I'm proud of what we've accomplished as a team. I take working on a team over working solo any day. That being said, another powerful lesson I've learned is when you are working on something alone, you really can do it. It's a point I made in the first devlog, and something that, in my mind, still rings true. Sometimes while working on a game, you may find yourself stuck on a feature or mechanic with no end in sight. However, I'm a firm believer that anyone can do anything. It's just a matter of having the drive to do it, and that applies to game dev too. For example, when I was tasked with implementing the system map for our game, I didn't think it was possible. How do you even make a randomly generated map? I certainly had no idea. After hours upon hours of research, refactoring code, and sometimes starting over entirely, I began to doubt myself. Eventually though, I did it because I didn't give up, and now I have something awesome to show off. So for those of you that are stuck on something with your game or just want to quit game dev entirely, don't. I know you can do it. If you're feeling inspired by that, I've been busy starting my own YouTube channel where I share similar words of wisdom. It's called Go Make Games. Feel free to check it out. Also, HOOKSCRAP Game of the Year 2023.
When we first started working on HOOKSCRAP, we planned to only take just 1 month developing it. 6 months later, we realized that was definitely not what ended up happening. But looking back on it, I'm really proud of what we did, and I think that the team really pulled off something incredible. That being said, looking back on it, I think the one thing I learned the most that I wish I had done from earlier on is that you need to sit down and actually play your game. You can't just develop, and never actually try what you're making. You need to see and ask yourself, is it fun? Just trying it out makes such a difference. Doing it more often, doing it earlier. Even if your game isn't complete, even if it's full of bugs, you still need to sit down and just try it and say, in spite of all these bugs, is there something special underneath? It took us a long time to finally get to the point where we could say yes, but when it did, it really was worth it. I hope this helps you in your own journey in making games, and I hope that you eventually make great games that I one day get to try. Good luck!
Hey everyone, this is Cam. I don't have anything scripted here. This is just my stream of consciousness, if you want to call it that, but you made it to the... You made it to the end of the video. Thank you for watching. Not just this devlog, but every devlog we've made for HOOKSCRAP. It's definitely been a very fun experience, I can say that much. Definitely a lot more work than I initially thought it was going to be. I think that's kind of like the naivety of game dev a little bit, but I would say in the end it was definitely an experience that was 100% worth its while. Just being able to work with, the amazing team behind me was an awesome experience and kind of set the tone for how a team culture should be in a game dev space. So I think in all, we definitely did a good job. By no means are we just talking to kind of like put ourselves down for like, oh yeah, like we missed doing all these things, like we could have done this better. Like, you know, it's never a bad thing to take a critical look at what you did. And we are all definitely super happy with what we've been able to accomplish. And a lot of us were either starting their first team projects or this was their biggest project at the time. So just being able to go from, you know, Game Jam to where we are now is definitely something special. So if you've watched every devlog, awesome. If this is the first one you've watched, this might be a little bit more confusing, but we're glad that you at least just spent some time checking us out. So if you haven't already, you can feel free to join the Discord. I'll make sure to link that in the description. And past that, link to wishlist on Steam will also be in the bio. You can also just join the Discord. We'll talk there if you have any questions. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Bye-bye.